Hello everyone and welcome back to DMG. A good while ago now I looked at the HP HDX 16, a gorgeous and very high performing laptop that, although it did have some flaws, is my current absolute favorite. So I thought I'd take a look at some of the other Pavilions. This is the Pavilion DV2000 Special Edition, specifically. This video has actually been a couple months in the making, because unfortunately this laptop does have some pretty big flaws that I had to fix first. We'll be talking about that later. But now that I have a fully working one, I cannot wait to show it off because, well, will it deliver the same HDX 16 experience in a smaller chassis? Well, let's find out. So first of all, this is not the special edition lid on here. This is a special edition laptop, as you can see from the inside. The inside has the special edition logo and the special edition design, but the lid is not the special edition one. Because I didn't know this until the lid exploded, and when I say that, it really did. I didn't know that the lid is a crucial part of the structural, part of the laptop. So when I got it, this corner was cracked. This is the original special edition lid. This corner was cracked, and I used it for a couple months, and one day I opened it, and the hinge, the left side hinge, just exploded. Shattered the case, shattered the bezel, so I had to buy a replacement hinge, and I couldn't source a replacement lid that was the original special edition design. But here it is, and it looks quite good. The wave design, I really do like. Their aesthetics were absolutely fantastic at this time. It doesn't have quite as distinct of a look as the HDX 16, but it is still quite visually striking. It hits the sex appeal aspect of the HP Pavilions that was absolutely an angle that HP was going for. Now, around the sides, as usual, optical drive, LightScribe, DVD rewritable, pretty good. 2 USB 2, 56K modem, small HP barrel jack for their smaller yellow tip chargers. Back, there's nothing but the vent. Side, I'll talk about those wires later. TV/S video out, VGA, HP, dot connector, RJ45, USB 2, Firewire 400, and express card. This one unfortunately did not come with a remote, and card reader. On the front, 3 headphone jacks, 2 headphone out and a microphone, and infrared receiver, and wireless switch. So let's go ahead and open it up. These wires are because the power button broke. So how you turn it on now is you plug the wires into each other. You connect them like you're hot wiring a car, and the laptop turns on. It's not fancy, but it works. Its display is an astonishingly glossy 1280 by 800 screen. I personally am a fan of glossy displays because I own so many laptops, and I can just use one that doesn't have a glossy display when I don't want a glossy display. But I absolutely understand why people hate them. Yes, the image quality is far superior. However, I mean, look, you can see everything behind me. You can see the little birds I'm making with my hands behind the camera. So, pretty awful if you're doing anything that is not in a completely dark room. However, I think the display looks absolutely gorgeous. This is, in fact, the DV2500 specifically. This is the model with the Intel graphics. There was an NVIDIA model, but unfortunately those are a bit rare because they all broke like 15 years ago because of NVIDIA's unfortunate, infamous GPU death caused by their weak solder. This did originally ship with Vista. I don't hate myself that much, so I'm not using that. And the processor in here is actually the biggest limitation of this machine. So this is the fastest CPU that will go in this laptop, a 2 GHz Core 2 Duo T7300. It originally shipped with a, I forget the name, but it was a 1.5 gigahertz chip, and that is painfully slow nowadays if you're trying to do literally anything in the modern era. So a 2 gigahertz chip is kind of the bare minimum for Core 2 Duos. So that is the biggest limitation of this machine. It's the CPU only being upgradable to 2 gigahertz, 4 megabyte cache, and 800 megahertz front side bus. Of course, 4 gigabytes RAM as standard, and it only runs at 667, even though the RAM I've installed is 800 megahertz. And of course, Intel 3945 ABG wireless card, since this is the original Centrino platform. So if you need 802.11 in networking, you will need to upgrade that card. One of my favorite things about the HDX was its speakers. Now, of course, there's no room for an integrated subwoofer like the HDX has on a laptop of this size. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It is, in fact, still quite good. The speakers are, once again, Altec Lansing. And, well, I'll just give you a little listen here. Note that the crackles and distortion that you heard do not occur on Windows 7. That is due to the audio driver for the chipset not working the best on Windows 10. So there's no distortion on Windows 7. That's not intrinsic to the speakers. That is a driver problem. They get decently far down in bass, and their treble response is good. Basically, they aren't too heavy on mid-range. They're not the loudest, and they're not the cleanest, but they are far, far better than anything I've heard on the business laptops that I typically look at. Let's play... And of course, just like the HDX 16, it has touch controls for multimedia. I actually find these to be far more responsive than the HDX. Sliding your finger like you would think to do on a long bar to adjust the volume, it does not work as expected, just like the HDX. You really just have to hold your finger at one side of the bar or somewhere in the middle. You can't slide up and down like what would naturally come to you. You can, but it's not very responsive. It definitely behooves one to just slide up and down. I also really like that the wireless on and off switch is down here on the front and not a touch control. My huge complaint with the HDX 16's touch controls was that the wireless on and off switch was up here, and the capacitive touch bar was way too sensitive. So if there were fingerprints on it, you would find your Wi-Fi randomly turning on and off because the laptop would register an input on the touch-sensitive wireless. So although it's not quite as cool as the huge bar of light up buttons that the HDX had, it's far more reliable. So you get your typical media controls and like play, pause, stop, volume, and then some buttons for HP's proprietary media software, which does the same thing as Windows Media Player and VLC. It just takes up more space on your hard drive. So I don't have that installed. Now, as you can see, it is actually compatible with HP's Express Card remotes. This is one that I bought aftermarket, so it was an option to have a remote with this laptop. Mine didn't ship with one from the factory, but that doesn't mean I can't put one in now. So, now it has a remote. It unfortunately doesn't have the click wheel that the HDX 16's remote had. It is just a standard remote with some little buttons, just volume control, forward and back, that sort of thing, and a button for Windows Media Center if you are on Windows 7, and of course a button that puts the laptop to sleep. interestingly enough, this power button will wake up the laptop from a full hard shutdown. Not just like a sleep mode. If I were to shut this all the way down and then press the power button, it would wake right up. So that's interesting. It means it's always listening for that IR code. I'm going to try and show off the display. I haven't really done this much for business laptops recently. Now, the viewing angles aren't that good. You can kind of see that they are absolutely not great. But that is to be expected. This is a T-in panel. I'd say the colors here are pretty damn good. Definitely one of the better laptop displays I've seen. It is a CCFL backlight, and honestly, that is a better thing on a laptop of this era, because when LED backlights, when those first started to get put on laptops, they were pretty awful. They all looked washed out, super blue, and luckily, the CCFL backlight on this isn't too yellow. It doesn't have that pinkish yellow tint that is afflicting a lot of similar ones. Let's see if I can find a bit of a better video. Of course, an important part of a laptop is the keyboard, so I'm going to give you a feel for that really quickly. I know I don't type correctly. I know you're supposed to put your fingers on the keys with the bumps. I don't care. That's how I type. An interesting thing about the keyboard is that it's actually raised at the edges. It looks like it's bent. It looks like it's broken, but it's supposed to be that way. The keyboard sweeps up at the left and right side, which is an interesting design. Absolutely does not affect the feel of it at all. It's just, it goes along with the curved arrow styling of the whole system. And it's an interesting detail, I'll just say that much. It has a webcam. I haven't used it much. I recall it working better on Windows 7 than Windows 10. But there it is. It's actually pretty decent. I mean, it doesn't look too bad. Hi, there I am. Room tour time. There's my floor. There's my workstation. There's my printer. Hi, printer. It's pretty decently responsive, and it doesn't have a lot of, like, crazy motion blur, and that is really the biggest problem with older webcams. It's not even the resolution. It's that they capture it like 15 frames per second, and the motion blur is horrendous. HP's webcams, to their credit, are great. Alright, now, final test. Of course, it is time for Game In. It is time for Game In. We shall play Unreal Tournament, because of course we will. That is what we do here. This, of course... Oh, hello, paper. This, of course, is the Intel GMA graphics, not the GeForce... I think it was like a GeForce 7300. Honestly, when you're getting into the GeForce 7300 territory, it's not going to be all that much better than the built-in Intel GMA on the chipset. Wow. Yeah, glossy displays can be horrible. There we go. Okay, so a blend of the display and the viewing angles. If I'm extra awful at the game right now, it's not entirely my fault. I am having a little trouble seeing it. So frame rate isn't crazy, like crazy bad. It's not crazy good either, because of course it is neither. It is whoa, that rhymed. Intel GMA. I mean, it's an Intel GMA. I can't say too much else. They are oops. They are passable. They get the job done pretty decently well. Of course, if you wanted to do much of any gaming, you would have gone with the NVIDIA version. Oh, bit of lag right out of the gate. Oh yes, give me a lag. It's doing that weird thing that I've only seen on certain Intel and ATI graphics cards. This never happens on Nvidia. The steam from this water, it sometimes flickers. Yes, right there. It's doing it. And when you walk close, it stops. That only happens on Intel and ATI graphics cards of a certain era, and I have no clue why. I also don't know why it's running Ice Tomb, the more demanding map, better than the last one that we tested. Oh, never mind. As soon as I pull out the rocket launcher, those particle effects absolutely ruin every chance of getting above like 10-ish frames per second. The dynamic lighting in this map is of course the most demanding thing. You hear the fan starting to ramp up. That is something that I'll talk about. So when I first got this, it was horribly overheating, and I just didn't know the reason why. Like, I cleaned out the fan, I thought I cleaned out the heatsink very well, I replaced the thermal paste, and it would still run at like 90 degrees Celsius after just a couple minutes of web browsing and that sort of thing, which I will admit, web browsing nowadays does push a Core 2 Duo pretty hard, because websites are pretty bloated, just so much image and video content. It's a bit hard on like a 17-year-old processor. But it would run just remarkably hot, just unsafely hot. We're talking high 90s, low 100s, which is of course not good for the processor. So I stripped it down and tried to clean the heatsink again, and I noticed that the heatsink is designed in, I'll say, a suboptimal way. So, damn it. The heat pipe, which carries the heat from the processor onto the heatsink fins, is placed directly in the middle of the heatsink, which, like, it not only impedes airflow, but it also gathers dust around the heat pipe, which you can't see from the outside of the heatsink. So even if you think you've cleaned out the heatsink 100%, you can't see any dust in it, you have to shine a flashlight through. And when I did that, I couldn't see through to the other side, because there was still a wall of dust that had accumulated around the heat pipe that I just couldn't see from the outside. So basically it was thermal throttling horribly because the airflow was blocked from dust that I couldn't even see. Of course that... Whoa! More weird smoke stuff. Steam, excuse me. Of course that is partially user error. Typically, you know... Well, since then I've gotten better about really thoroughly checking heat sinks, but it's a bit unfortunate that dust accumulation happens because, well, most people wouldn't know that the heatsink needed to be cleaned. Like, they wouldn't know, oh, you need to take your laptop apart every couple of years and clean out the heatsink. So that is why a lot of the NVIDIA ones are just completely dead, because, well, the NVIDIA chipsets are especially susceptible to heat. And if the processor is just heating up... If the processor is just heating up the NVIDIA card because it can't cool down because the dust is clogging the heatsink, well, of course that'll just kill the graphics card. Well, that's enough discussion and game. Honestly, final opinions, I love it. It's cute, I like it. It is an absolute bastard to work on. It uses 9 different screw types. It could be cut down to 3 or 4. It could use 2 or 3 screw types, and 3 or 4 if you count different colors as different screw types. It is so annoying to keep track of 9 different types of screws. Why did they do this? And not really just different depths. We're talking different lengths as well. Like, sorry, what am I saying, depths? I mean, like, not only different widths, but it's mainly different lengths that are different by like 0.5 millimeters. Are you telling me they really needed to be 0.5 millimeters different? You couldn't have just like used the same screw twice? But the optical drive is fast, it's quiet. I actually used this to burn a crap ton of CDs a while ago, and it did a great job at that. The multimedia controls, they're better, they're more responsive than the HDX. Screen, very glossy, but I like that. If you don't like a glossy screen, of course you'll hate it, but I think it's great. The arrow design, while not quite as solid as the HDX, still looks pretty great. And touchpad, that's another thing I actually never mentioned. Touchpad is larger than some of the Dell Latitude business laptops. It's nice and responsive. Scrolling can be a little wonky. Unfortunately, it doesn't scroll very responsively. That's mainly on Windows 10 because, again, these drivers are meant for XP and Vista, and they work a lot better on Windows 7. So in general, I'd actually recommend it. I'd say it's a pretty solid little media laptop. So maybe like an 8 out of 10, knocking a few points for the heatsink problems and all of the NVIDIA ones being long dead. But I like it. I really like it. So that's it for this video. Thank you everyone for watching. I've got a lot more laptop videos on this channel if you're interested, so check those out. But that's it for this one. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.